In episode 4, Miranda is chasing Cassie through the crowded train as Cassie is frantically trying to get away. Eventually, she sees some transit police and goes up to him and says, "This crazy woman is chasing me. Pretty sure she's armed." But when Miranda sees the cop, she quickly gets off the train and it makes Cassie look like she's crazy. So Miranda gets out of there, but once Cassie arrives back in the city, she heads to Annie's place. And Annie is not too happy with her because she didn't get back to her in a timely manner. And it takes a lot of convincing, but eventually Annie lets Cassie up to her apartment when she says, "Annie, I saw her. I saw Miranda." She shows Annie and Max the bag of shredded documents, figuring that they can just tape it all back together and figure out what was on it. But Annie is more concerned with her friend because Cassie went through a pretty traumatic experience and they've yet to talk about it. She tells Annie, "You know we can talk about other things than the FBI and this mystery woman chasing you, right?" But Cassie tries to get it back on track to Miranda. She figures that if Miranda got off the train, there must be security camera footage. And Annie tells her, "I do know a guy that works for the MTA. He might be able to pull that footage." Might is the key word. So she's going to look into it the next day, but she goes to bed, and Cassie and Max start piecing together the shredded documents. And by morning, they've been able to put basically all of it back together. And upon reviewing the documents, Max says it's nothing worth getting murdered over. It has to do with a company called Lionfish, which is a holding company. And the only connection that he can find to Alex Sokolov is the fact that Alex was on the board with a company called MinuteJet. So they start researching MinuteJet, and they find out that MinuteJet flies from New Jersey to Maine every single day. But the weird thing about this flight is the fact that it's basically on the ground in Maine for about 20 minutes until it turns around and heads back to New Jersey. So Cassie goes into her headspace to talk to dead Alex and tells him that Alex's mom had mentioned that whatever was on those documents were going to make Alex look guilty. She starts questioning Alex about this flight, but he's not really giving any information up because, he's dead. So she now knows that she has to get on that flight. She has to figure out either what was going on the ground in those 20 minutes, or more importantly, what was going on up in the air during the flight. Although dead Alex thinks this is a terrible idea. She ends up leaving Annie's apartment and immediately calling Megan to find out if Megan knows anybody who works for MinuteJet. Megan, coincidentally, is in a food court with her son, where she's about to do one of the drops with Mr. Hawk. But when Cassie inquires about MinuteJet, Megan lets her know that, Nate works for him. Nate, the pilot, who's very into Cassie. Cassie isn't too thrilled about it, but she ends up calling Nate up and inquiring how she's going to get on this flight. And luckily for Cassie, Nate, being the pilot, picks the crew. Unfortunately for Cassie, Nate, being the pilot, wants sexual favors in return. But Cassie found out from Megan that Nate has a lot of gambling debt, so instead of giving up that ass, she's just going to pay off his gambling debt instead. And it seems like Nate would rather have the ass, but he accepts the offer of paying off his gambling debts and tells her, "Okay, meet me at the airport." But this is going to be cutting it close with meeting up with Davey and his family. Davey has arrived in New York City, although he is kind of skeptical because Cassie did tell him that her apartment was broken into. But they've agreed to meet at the aquarium at noon. So Cassie bolts it over there, but before she meets up with Davey and the family, she takes a swig from a flask and then douses some mouthwash so it doesn't look suspicious. She then does meet up with Davey's family, and it's obvious that Davey's daughters are thrilled to see Cassie. They love her. But Davey and Cassie end up butting heads when the girls want some stupid toy that's being sold. And Davey's trying to teach his girls that just because you want something doesn't mean you need something. Even after Cassie offers to buy it, Davey says no. So Cassie buys it for him anyway, puts it in their bag, and tells them, "Don't tell your dad." She continues to go through the aquarium with her nieces, but gets a phone call from Megan, who has arrived back at home with a stack of cash, but that has really nothing to do with the phone call. The phone call has to do with the fact that Cassie is inquiring about MinuteJet, and Megan wants to know if she's getting off their route, because it affects her. But in the middle of this conversation, Cassie realizes that she doesn't know where her nieces are, and she starts kind of hyperventilating. She's a flashback to her childhood when she's walking in what looks like a gymnasium, and her dad says, "Just breathe," and she does that, and she's able to locate her nieces. Shortly after this, she needs to go because she has to make it to the airport in time, and she agrees to meet Davey and the family for dinner. Although when Cassie gets on the plane, to her shock, no one else is on it. Even though the manifest says that there are 7 passengers, Cassie is the only one other than the pilots. She asks Nate about it, but Nate says, "They pay me too well to ask questions, so take a seat." So she sits down for this 2-hour flight, and she's trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And she goes into her headspace with Alex, and while kind of trying to figure it out, he decides to distract her with dancing, and she admits to him that she might be falling in love with him, which is crazy because she knows he's dead, although she snapped out of it when they prepare to land. And when they do, Cassie notices that they're unloading some pretty heavily fortified boxes. So, at the behest of Nate, she sneaks off the plane to investigate, opening them up and taking pictures of them and their serial numbers. And when she gets back on the plane, she realizes that what she just took pictures of were the materials to make rocket launchers. Now, while Cassie was doing all of this, Annie had gone to work, expecting to be reamed out by her boss for calling in a favor, but her boss doesn't ream her out. simply saying that the person that she called is a person that's going to want a favor in return. And Annie is going to have to do that. So when this person calls, do what they say, but don't ever tell me about it. Kind of takes Annie off guard a little bit. As she's leaving, she finds out that the MTA contact that she has can't get the footage for her because it's going to draw some red flags. Although she tells her assistant, yeah, I'm going to need a different answer than that. So she leaves the office and gets a phone call from Annie, and Annie is trying to tell her about the flight, how weird it is, the rocket launchers, and how she thinks that Alex Sokolov and possibly Miranda are just moving shipments through these fake flights. The problem is Annie can't hear any of it. The whole conversation is muffled. And it results in Annie simply hanging up because she can't make out anything that Cassie's saying. So Cassie sits down and waits for the plane ride home. And when she gets home, she rushes over to the restaurant. But Davy's family doesn't meet her there. It's just Davy. And Davy has come to kind of confront her because he found the gift that she gave to his daughters. And he's not happy about it. She thinks it's just a small, innocuous gift. But his thing is, you heard me tell them that they couldn't have it. And then you bought it for them against my wishes and told my daughters to lie to me. That's an issue. He's also concerned about her drinking because she's sitting at a table with one empty glass and another one that she's sipping from. And he's seeing the same patterns in Cassie that he saw in his father, and it really concerns him. He brings up the fact that she showed up at the aquarium reeking of alcohol and mouthwash. And this confrontation results in the two getting kicked out of the restaurant because they're making a scene. Davy goes outside to hail a cab, but Cassie is quickly behind him, continuing this argument. Davy once again brings up the fact that she's acting like her dad, and she thinks that Davy is just taking all the hatred that he had for their father and pushing it on her. And he kind of is doing that, but it's because she's acting like him. One thing that's always hurt Davy is the fact that right in front of Davy when they were kids, their father told Cassie, "You're the son I never had." Although Cassie doesn't remember any of this because she's blocked a lot of her childhood out, all the bad parts of it. And mainly all the bad parts involving her father because the two had a close bond. Davy tells her, I hoped one day you were going to be able to see things the way they truly were, but you never did. He kisses her on the forehead, gets in a cab, and leaves. And Cassie's a little overwhelmed, and she calls her friend Annie, but Annie doesn't pick up. She's at dinner. She then calls Shane, but Shane doesn't pick up because he's at dinner. So with no one else to turn to, and she doesn't want to be alone, she heads back to Buckley's place because Buckley's been hitting her up ever since their one-night stand, and she sleeps with him. Now, let's get back to Miranda real quick, because after Miranda left the train, she headed back to her apartment where the guy Victor was waiting for her. He wants to know if Miranda has found out what Cassie Bowden knows. And Miranda starts kind of making excuses, but Victor just cuts her off, saying that Janet Sokolov is threatening to freeze the remaining cash. And it's because of the fact that Miranda hasn't cleaned up this mess quick enough. So Miranda starts telling Victor what she knows about Cassie, but Miranda doesn't believe that Cassie's actually a flight attendant because of the fact that at her apartment she found a bunch of passports, she's gone to Unisphere, and she went to the Sokolov residence. So she thinks there's something fishy going on. But Victor's big concern is the fact that Cassie might have his, quote, personal property. And Miranda has no idea if Cassie has it or not. Victor threatens just to get somebody else to do it, but Miranda says, no, you can't do that. This is my fuck up. I'll fix it. But Victor tells her, if I ever see you near Haplong again, I'm not going to be happy. Don't make this one of your obsessions. Get your bag, get on a flight, and head back to London. But she doesn't do that. She wants to fix it. And she ends up heading to Sabrina's apartment, where, coincidentally, after talking to dead Alex, that's where Cassie's headed as well, trying to get some answers as to what is going on in those planes. Cassie and dead Alex figure that maybe Sabrina has some answers. But when Cassie gets to her apartment, it's locked, and she can hear that there's a struggle going on inside. So she leaves the apartment, calling the police to report that something's wrong, when all of a sudden Sabrina's body flies out of the window and lands on the pavement right in front of Cassie. Thank you so much for watching this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Like the video if you liked it. Hit thumbs down if you thought it sucked. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen, don't worry, it'll be up soon. And please be nice in the comments section. Nobody likes being told they suck, even if it's true. Oh, and sharing's caring.